So welcome everybody to our final day of Build Peace 2021. We themed this "The Computer Says No," both because we recognize the computer sometimes says no, and also just appreciating anybody that has joined us and participated through a lot of the tech issues through it. So just wanted to say thank you for that. And we're really excited for our final day of short talks. We have, let's see, 4 short talks up. Gloria is not going to make it with us today, but if she steps in at the end, then we can invite her to join us at the end. So we will start with Tatiana. And what's going to happen today is each short talk will be about 10 minutes. So in the chat, I will chat each one of you when we're at sort of the 1 or 2 minute warning. So you've got a thumbs up just in that space. And then we will take questions at the end. So for anybody that is here, please feel free to use the Q&A function or use the chat directly. And we can use that as a way of creating conversation. And then for those of you that are presenting, we'll start sort of the open conversation with a question between each of you two fellow panelists. So if there's things that come up as you're listening to other people speak, we can start there. Tatiana, is it you and Jael that are both presenting? Cool.
She's going to help me to project the presentation, but I will.
Yeah, hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone.
How are you?
Fine. I'm going to present by my computer our short talk, so Tatiana can tell us about DigiMENTE, but I'm going to present that deck.
Beautiful. Okay, let's do it. Are you ready?
Ready.
Amazing. Okay, Tatiana, welcome.
Thank you. So really glad to be here. Thank you very much, Build Peace team, for inviting us to this space. We're very glad to talk to you about DigiMENTE, a project we have been working on these last 2 years. So today we're going to walk you through some of the work that we have developed with DigiMENTE, and we're going to focus on the lessons that we learned and what comes next for this project in this moment. Next, please. So just to get started, to let you know what is specifically as DigiMENTE. DigiMENTE is the first contextualized media literacy curriculum for Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America. And it was developed in a partnership that we made with Google News Initiative, Movilizatorio, Teach for All, and their partners in 3 countries of Latin America that are Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico. And why we did create DigiMENTE. So DigiMENTE was born inside of the growing evidence of the negative effects of misinformation and fake news. Just to give you some data, in Latin America, over 70% of the population doesn't know how to recognize facts from fiction online. And this number gets to over 80% when talking about middle and high school students surveyed by our team in this project. So with DigiMENTE, what we aim is to create the skills for our youth to have an active and critical role in the media ecosystem and to strengthen their critical thinking, their reflection, interpretation, communication, and decision-making in the social media and in the digital world. At the end, what we wanted to create is to promote responsible and active digital citizens. So considering these reasons and this context, we created a new curriculum with 4 modules that each one has in general 16 lessons planned, each one that allows youth ages from 12 to 17 to develop some specific skills, which are the first module responds to have a critically analyze and understand the news and information we have in media. The second skill is about creating and sharing content in an ethical way. The third one is to participate in their communities, in the digital communities. And the fourth one is to strengthen their skills in critical thinking and reflection. That's like the main content of the curriculum. Here we wanted to show a little bit about the process of how we created that and the rigorous also like feedback and ongoing process with the students and teachers that allow us to create our curriculum. We started with this project in March of 2020, in the beginning of the pandemic, with a very robust analysis of the available curriculums and resources for media literacy that existed worldwide. We started with that. After that, in the first phase of the study on our project, we studied like 20 curriculums. And after that, in September, we piloted that version of the curriculum with more than 300 students in Colombia, Mexico, and Argentina. And as we said, we did a partnership with Teach for All and Enseñas Network, which were our partners that allow us to directly interact with the students. After that, we obtained a very good critical feedback from students and teachers who by then had been adapting to the educational challenges brought by the pandemic, both in urban and rural areas of these countries. We had an improved version of the curriculum, as well as its complementary resources, such as lessons plans, videos, and podcasts. And we started to develop a web platform to put all out of this information online and for free. We're going to share that platform in a few minutes in the chat so you can see it. And as I said, a very good thing of DigiMENTE is that it's free and available for everyone. After that, in February of this year, we started to develop an impact assessment of the curriculum and also a very intense work of sharing the curriculum with potential partners, such as educational networks and public organizations. And we started to implement the curriculum with these partners and to be with them in the implementation. And this work of setting partnership started this year, and we keep on continuing on doing these partnerships and to communicate what DigiMENTE is so that this tool can really be like for the youth in Latin America. And this is the general process. Now we want to share a little bit more about the impact assessment of this process, how we created that, and what was the way of analyzing what we have been doing. Here is a flow chart that shows how we designed the impact assessment. The design of the 16 lessons plans was an important part of the research and development and the development phase that allowed the pilot study we implemented during the second half of 2020. When we discussed what to assess, what we wanted to evaluate, we intended to evaluate all the curriculum, but it was not a very feasible way because the context of the pandemic and just one semester, it was not possible to evaluate all the curriculum. So we took into consideration the impact assessment that was designed by the Civic Online Reasoning, that is a curriculum that was created by Stanford. And we saw that they didn't evaluate the whole curriculum, but just a selection of the lessons plans, of some lessons plans. So we did the same thing. We prioritized 12 lessons about the 16 we have, and they were the ones that we evaluated. Our evaluation consisted in a quasi-experimental design, and we took a convenient sample for the population of Teach for All students in Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico. The size of the sample was 485 students, and we divided it into groups, the treatment group and the control group. Both groups had to complete a test to measure their abilities in our 4 areas that are evaluation of information, creation of content, participation in online settings, and ethics. And after that test, the treatment group received DigiMENTE, whereas the control group did not. DigiMENTE for the treatment group was delivered over a 12-week period with 11 teachers that were trained specifically to implement the curriculum within the context of the impact assessment. And after those 12 weeks, a second test was taken both for the treatment and the control group. The data we collected with both tests was finally processed with several statistical tests to check the distribution of the data, to check the comparability between the groups and the changes we wanted to improve and create in the studies that received DigiMENTE. That was like the general flowchart, and here are some of the key insights we got from this impact assessment. The first reflection we had is that the impact assessment was very affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in its implementation. For example, we have to make shorter online lessons to deliver to the students. So we could assume that this impact assessment, if we carry out in a very back to normal setting that would show a greater improvement in the students. Another key insight is that the evaluation data provided us a valuable feedback on when and how DigiMENTE could best achieve its goals. But the practice of understanding a project impact in light of a hard-based evidence, statistical analysis, and data is a really scarce practice in Latin America and media literacy environment. So we are very proud in this sense that DigiMENTE is actually a leading case for the region, not only because of its content, but because of the process of evaluation and continuous like co-creation with the students and the teachers. So we are we wanted to highlight this. And specifically about the results we had, the skills that present a greater development with DigiMENTE are evaluation, and the item related to that was students identify the message purpose of the content they review. And the second skill that was very improved with DigiMENTE was about creation. So students reflect on their rights and responsibilities in content production and distribution. That was the good things that we saw about DigiMENTE. And about the skills that were less developed, we saw that evaluation, about specifically students find more difficult to evaluate the evidence that was in the information they see on social media and the news. And the other one was ethics. Students find it more difficult to reflect on rights and responsibilities in the content and in the media interactions, production, and circulation. That was more like the quantitative part, but for ending, I want to show a story, a more qualitative story that could show us the impact that DigiMENTE has in our countries and in these years that we have implemented this. Here is Diego Vladimir Canizales. He is a teacher at Enseña for Colombia, which his aim is to ensure that students in vulnerable communities have access to quality education. The school in which he teaches is located in the outskirts of Tuluá. That's a very small town in the southwest of Colombia. And 26 students in this school from ages from 12 to 14 received DigiMENTE remotely by Zoom. So they implemented the curriculum between April 5 and June 15, when Colombia was experiencing the Paro Nacional, a national strike. I don't know if you heard about that, but it was a very hard moment. So during those days, they experimented massive mobilization, public disorder, and acts of violence that were broadcasted day and night on different social platforms and in different international news. When Vladimir was implementing DigiMENTE, for instance, the Palace of Justice of their city, a symbol of history and pride of the city, was burned down. So his students felt fear, anger, anguish, and in some cases, despair of their future. In middle of this chaos, DigiMENTE allowed them to learn safe and responsible ways to share their feelings and ideas on social network. They didn't have this opportunity before, so it was a very good way to canalize all these feelings, and it was a really specific way to see how DigiMENTE could create value. It was also like a way out of the difficult reality the country was going on, and allow these students to live a meaningful learning experience, to take a powerful role in sharing their stories and acknowledging their influence on the internet. The curriculum was very flexible to adapt its content to the needs posed by the strike we had at this moment. So that's the process we have been doing, some of the results, and just to close, we want to share what are we doing right now and what comes next for DigiMENTE. All this year, as I said, we have been working on doing some partnership and implementing DigiMENTE with some educational networks and schools, but also in making partnership with mass media to keep on spreading this initiative. We have implemented, as I said, the curriculum with different type of organizations such as public sector, educational networks in Colombia, in Argentina, and Mexico. And what we want right now is to make this project sustainable, and that this could be possible with organization and board networks to know about this. So finally, we would like to invite you all to help us to spread and to amplify this type of work, So we would like you to invite all to help us in it with working proactively in media education, fighting misinformation, and spread media literacy with DigiMENTE. We will share you the platform web so you can have a look. And thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks so much for speaking through digital literacy and just how you're doing that training. If folks have questions for Tatiana and Jael, then please drop them into the chat. We are going to move on to Marissa, and let's see if I can get this to actually share. Marissa is going to speak about art and resistance through education, and will be our second short talk speaker. So whenever.
Hello, everyone. Good. Wow. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this international community. Thank you for having me and ARTE, representing today on this wonderful last day, celebratory day. My name is Marissa Gutierrez-Vicario, and I'm the Executive Director of Art and Resistance Through Education based out of New York. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about one of our programs called Youth Voices Lead. So again, Adaptation through Amplification. Thank you, Julie, for sharing these slides. We're actually going to jump to the next slide. Also thank you for that wonderful presentation to follow. So with ARTE, we are a grassroots organization. We work throughout New York City and also with different communities, and we work to amplify the voice of young people for human rights change through the visual arts. And we do that in many different ways. And like everyone in the world, part of our work prior to the pandemic was working on murals, doing, still implementing our arts-based curriculum, which I'll talk about in a second, but, more in the physical space, making murals, working with paint, working with students, looking at what we call artivism, or this beautiful intersection of art and activism. So on the next slide, you will see that, part of this is why we're here, and this is why I'm talking about our program today, Youth Voices Lead, is we found that, like everyone else, we had to pivot to digital technology. And while it was such an unusual space for some of us, and right now it's so normal, right? Right now it feels normalized. Right now it feels like the black squares that we see, this boxes, this seems like, I actually tried to almost put people into breakout rooms in a physical conference the other day, and it was I was like, oh wait, we don't have that. We can't mute people, like, we don't do things like that. So that has been interesting transition for folks. But Youth Voices Lead, which I'll be talking about, was an interesting opportunity to actually realize some projects and this idea that we had for a long time, but the pandemic gave us an opportunity. So it was an opportunity we took to what does it mean to actually use this our curriculum of art and artivism, and to take that and to put it in this digital space that would actually give students opportunity to train and organize other students. So this is what Youth Voices Lead is all about. It was something that started, I think we started recruiting, as you can see from the slide here, around August. And then we started the program in January 2021. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more about this, but if you could go to the next slide, that would be wonderful. So our mission of this particular program within ARTE is that we believe that if we provide young people with artistic tools, human rights education, and digital platform in this case, to come together, they will be able to continue their activist journeys for racial justice, and in turn be able to ignite concrete campaigns for social change within their communities. So this was what we had envisioned. And again, using the pandemic as a way to let's try this out. Let's launch this pilot program to see what we can do in order to bring this program together. So on the next slide, I'm just going to show you a quick recruitment video and really thinking about the question a little bit more, how we use this digital platform to think about what does a world led by youth look like. So if we could play that for a moment, that would be great. And this was a recruitment video we shared. Thank you. So on the next slide, you'll see, we'll talk a little bit about, why Youth Voices Lead. So as I'd mentioned, this came out of the pandemic as a way to continue building leadership and activism when a time where a lot of young people felt really disconnected from each other. So we launched an application process and we saw that a lot of students were kind of like, we don't go to class anymore. So we in the physical space, so we don't get to see people, interact with people in the same way. Also, those who might have been still in school at that time were obviously for good reasons, being social distancing, it wasn't the same experience. So they were really searching for an opportunity to be in space and be together and to do something artistic, do something that reflected on their leadership skills. So we, like I mentioned, we launched the program or the application, I think August this. Well, actually, no, actually we might have started I now remember we actually started in December, because the reason for that is we actually got a lot of applications within a few weeks. So we were really, we're a small grassroots organization. So we were very much like beautifully surprised in the sense that, we had like over 130 applications within a few weeks. And even from students who told us like, we heard about this on the subway. We overheard two moms talking about this program on the subway, so I decided to apply. So really interesting ways of why students really wanting to be in space and community with other students. So so our hope is that, and I'll continue forward, but like our hope is that we will, this was an opportunity to unite young people across the city who felt disconnected now more than ever, and especially at a time where folks, a lot of mental health, the topic of mental health became something that we actually could talk about in a space. We could talk about, what was happening to young people even before the pandemic, and now where, this isolation, this disconnect, and how that does affect mental health issues of young people. So that was one of the things that we had talked about. On the next slide, you will see, so these are just some learning. I know my time is coming up to a close a little bit, but we learned a few different things, right? So one is that youth definitely want the opportunity to stay connected. So we did this, and we're still exploring this a little bit more, of putting young people into smaller groups within the program itself, so they'll have an opportunity to connect and interact in closer spaces and more comfortable groups. Because we all know, even with Zoom, even though we're faced to look at a screen, it still can feel awkward and uncomfortable. So we still want to figure out ways to explore meaningful connections, even within the cohort itself. On the next slide, you'll see the need to, so we'll talk about the need to scale up this work. So we want to also, I think we had between 10 and 12 workshops, within this first cohort. We're in the middle of this, a new cohort, which is exciting. And we want to increase those, the workshops. We also want to increase the number of students involved. And we're also exploring, and this is really exciting, so Youth Voices Lead is geared towards young folks in New York City or New York. But we also, what does Youth Voices Lead National look like? What is, we also had a few international applications. So we want to think about what is an international cohort. The sky is the limit, and digital platform actually gives us an opportunity to connect people in ways that we wouldn't have been able to without it. So we're grateful for that. On the next slide. So, we also talk about the summit. So one thing that we did was this a culminating project. And this is actually, while it was the end project, we also saw this as the beginning, right? So young people came together, they co-created this weekend summit, Saturday summit. So they led presentations on their own to train other community members on issues like mass incarceration, housing, education, the right to health. All these issues were that they actually learned in the curriculum and were able to explore during the summit, which I was super excited about. So this is something for young people, created by young people for young people. And again, like I said, this is something that I'm so grateful for that came out of the pandemic, because while we were making murals and creating and involving youth leadership in the creation of art and murals, I think this was really a way to further explore and look at what does true youth and genuine leadership look like within an organization. On the next slide, you'll see also just a few testimonials. I won't go through all of them, but one I really loved was I'll read this. I will absolutely use this experience in the future. The knowledge I've gained and the topics I've learned has opened my eyes on issues I would usually overlook because I felt like there could be nothing done. That mindset, however, was wrong, and it's because of ARTE I realized this: everything I do matters. And that was from one of the young people in the program, which it made my heart sing. You know, the idea that, I mean, I wish, it's one of those things where we don't give young people voices. They have voices, but we want to figure out ways that we want them to understand that, yes, your voice does matter, and we are here. We're here to amplify it, and we're here to support you. We're here for it. So next slide, you'll see just what the future looks like. So for us, we're looking at, you know, we're committed to developing opportunities for participants to stay connected in this work. Like I said, the Youth Voices Lead shouldn't be an end product. It's the beginning. It's a door opening, thinking about youth activism in a way where young people, we don't want to tokenize young people. We want to amplify them. We want that they are the Youth Voices Lead. So one thing that we're in the process of doing, and it's not an easy process. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes commitment. We're trying to continue to rebuild or build our junior board, which is a youth board. So that's something we've never had, and Youth Voices Lead and this digital platform is allowing us to have that. And then also, you know, even like building a newsletter for alumni in the program to continue their work. You know, everything we want to do, we want to, like I said, continue to involve them in workshops. Today is not an example, but we'll have future examples where they're actually leading the workshops, and we're here to coordinate and organize with them, but with them and in co-creation with them. Next slide. Yeah, so just, you know, if you have questions, please contact us. We're in the process. I loved the previous presentation because we're in the process of thinking like, how do we evaluate our impact? How do we evaluate impact with young people? And, you know, and what does the future look like? You know, again, I would love to see Youth Voices Lead International. I'd love to see, I guess the last thing I'll say is I'm so grateful that we were able to, in the time of such grief and such trauma for so many folks, this was one bright light that and gave me such personal joy into seeing like what we can do and how we can use digital tools as a way to increase and further youth activism in the world. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing the other presentations.
Thank you. That was really beautiful. Yeah, I was thinking about just like how important it was just as that period of time within COVID. All right, so we've got the next person that we've got up is Mina. And Mina is going to speak about the Republic of Kindness. So our virtual communities creating a greater divide between the haves and have-nots. So Mina, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Okay, I don't know. I'm not. Okay. Some reason. Oh, there we are. There I am. Okay. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, those both those presentations kind of talk a little bit about. They talk about youth, and mine also deals a little bit with youth. So my topic is: are virtual communities creating a greater divide between the haves and have-nots? Now, I started to think about this topic when I was teaching as an adjunct professor at a local university here in Chicago. When we all went into lockdown and in-person classes moved completely online, I almost immediately recognized that some of my students were facing challenges in the virtual classroom. For example, Joseph, and that's not his real name, did not own a laptop. He just had a smartphone. And he had to use his smartphone for everything: to write papers, to log on to class, to do his homework, apply for internships and jobs. Another student, Cassandra, again, not her real name, had a laptop, but connectivity was so poor that her audio and video was constantly in and out. Gabriella, another student, had to keep her audio and video off the entire time because she lived in a multi-generational home where she lacked the privacy to fully participate in class. She had, there were young children, grandmothers, all living in the same household, and she couldn't participate in a lot of the class activities. These students often logged on late or simply just didn't attend at all. Their assignments were almost always late as they had to do research, and that was difficult to do with the libraries being closed, with the university being closed, and not having high-speed internet or digital tools. So these students and many others with similar problems lived in neighborhoods that on the south and west side of Chicago. Now, these are already struggling, lower income, predominantly Black and brown communities. In contrast to these students, I also had students who lived on the affluent north side of Chicago. Now, they all had laptops, broadband access, and privacy. So when I spoke to my colleagues during staff meetings, they also said that they had similar experiences. Now, I'm just going to go old school for a second. The percentage of people who use broadband services on the underserved south and west side is 36 to 54%, while the more prosperous north side of Chicago is 86 to 94%. Huge difference from 36 to 94. My students who were already left behind their peers because they come from underserved grade schools, elementary and high schools, now face the additional barriers with virtual learning at the university level. Now, large parts of the south and west side neighborhoods lack the underlying infrastructure for residents to access high-speed internet. So it's not just that these residents in these neighborhoods couldn't afford high-speed internet, it simply wasn't available there at any price. Now, this isn't a problem just in Chicago, nor is the impact limited to the education field. There was a research done by the Pew Research Center in February 2021. They surveyed US adults, and they concluded that the digital lives between the lower and higher income groups are significantly different. And this has just become more apparent during the pandemic, as almost every aspect of our lives suddenly moved online. Virtual communities replaced in-person gatherings, and lower income households face numerous obstacles in participating in the new digital landscape. Now, 2020, as a lot of you may remember, was an election year here in the US. So in addition to teaching, I was also contracted to work on a ballot initiative that would reduce taxes on low-income households. It was called the Fair Tax Campaign. So when my work on the Fair Tax Campaign moved online, I worried that we weren't reaching the income groups that were going to be most impacted by the passing of the referendum. Normally with campaigns, we would do in-person presentations at libraries, churches, community centers, all over the state. Anywhere where diverse groups of people, diverse income levels would gather, we would do our presentations. But with the lockdowns, the only way to reach any group was with virtual meetings. Our online presentations targeted mostly people who were in the privileged position of working from home. These were also the same people who had access to computers, smartphone, and broadband. The essential workers, as we were calling them here in the US, the grocery store employees, the warehouse workers, the drivers, restaurant employees, were all left out of the conversation, partially because they had to work in person and partially because they lacked digital tools. Now, while we did many radio and TV ads to appeal to reach out to diverse groups of people, many in the lower income neighborhoods didn't have the access to computers or broadband, or were not able to navigate some of the online platforms and missed the opportunity to participate and learn firsthand the benefits of this tax referendum. This referendum, if passed, was going to impact them the most. We were essentially trying to reduce the state income tax for lower income earners and raise it for the millionaires and billionaires. And the additional tax revenue that was going to be generated would go for healthcare, education, childcare, and other services that lower income households vitally needed. So for the digitally connected, the pandemic, was inconvenient, but it was not paralyzing. It was fairly easy to switch to the online environment. Remote education, remote work, remote services were not, a problem for them. There was a Zoom meeting for everything. I've attended book clubs. There was local council meetings, virtual conferences like this. I even had a virtual appointment with my doctor for an ear infection. There were not many obstacles for the digitally connected to participate in this virtual world. However, the transition to online classes, job applications, workplace meetings, workshops, doctor's appointments, due to the lockdown, has not benefited marginalized communities. Limited access to these essential services added to the already existing inequities and historical injustices. Now, peace building is all about inclusion. Civic participation across communities that's inclusive is necessary to prevent, mitigate, and transform underlying political, social, and economic roots of conflict. You know, things like lack of access to government services, healthcare, education, work opportunities. These are the underlying roots of conflict. And due to the pandemic, the ability to participate in civic life through dialogue, through mediation, restorative circles, and civic engagements became much more difficult for the less virtually connected. Again, they were the ones left behind. And we know that fostering dialogue and building relationship is essential to peace building. The UN has actually said that almost 3.74 billion people, that's almost half the world's population, is still offline. And the majority of these people, the majority of the people that are offline live in developing countries. The UN has called this digital divide the new face of inequality. They went on to say, and I quote, that broadband service is a basic human right, similar to education and water. Because it exacerbates racial inequities and access to healthcare and education, addressing the digital divide should be given the same priority as other societal problems. So what should we do? So there's things at the macro level that can be done, like advocate for investment in the infrastructure by our governments. Big tech and ISPs, they have to help us close the gaps and provide connectivity and equal access to all residents, regardless of where they live. We can also provide laptops to low-income households, not just students. And so some of my students actually, as the pandemic continued on longer than we expected, we started to give them laptops for those that didn't have laptops. But we should actually give laptops to all low-income households. So if they're going to be applying for jobs and interviewing for jobs online, they have a laptop. We should advocate to make internet and broadband access affordable across income groups. So it's not good enough for them to just have a laptop. We should also make internet broadband access affordable. And finally, we have to provide training so that everyone can navigate the digital world. I think it was Nanjala, the keynote speaker, mentioned the other day that we are building websites that people can't understand or navigate. And this again limits political and social participation. So, but here's what we can do as peace builders and activists. We can, on the most basic level, do something. We can teach those in our immediate surroundings how to use a computer and the internet, for those that don't know how. I've been doing that with my elderly relatives and my neighbors, helping them sign up for vaccine appointments, showing them how to set up virtual meetings with their healthcare providers. It's a small step, but a necessary one. There's some of the websites are so difficult to navigate. It's particularly in the beginning when when the vaccine first came out. It was you had to check every hour, and for people who don't know how to navigate the internet, this was very difficult. So rethinking the systems and infrastructure that has caused the digital divide is complex and long overdue. The pandemic has reminded us not just that the immediate impact of the digital divide, it's highlighted its compounding impact over the years. And then there's enough research that shows that students without internet access fell behind during the pandemic. We saw this. Lower income neighborhood residents with inadequate access to the internet were unable to make vaccine appointments, which were snapped up by the digitally connected groups. They also missed out on job opportunities, as job searches, applications, and interviews all went online. So it's imperative that going forward, we build a sustainable and inclusive post-pandemic digital landscape that's as part of our peace building efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. I appreciate that very much. And just that human piece of being able to connect to our neighbors as a way to start to move forward some of the digital divides and change that. Jenna-Lee, you are our final short talk speaker for today. So I will turn it over to you when you're ready. So Jenna-Lee is speaking about social media, a powerful tool for understanding and dismantling violence against women.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm Jenna-Lee Strugnell from the Center of Analytics and Behavioral Change, and we run a range of projects, including projects around democracy and misinformation and vaccine hesitancy and also xenophobia. And today I'm talking about our project called heCareZA, which is looking at stopping gender-based violence, preventing gender-based violence through engaging men. So my background is in psychology and narrative therapy, and I also have masters in peace building, looking at engaging men to prevent gender-based violence. And so there are different components to the work that we're doing. One is using social media listening tools to do research on the conversations on public social media around misogyny and gender-based violence. So this allows us to see the volume of the conversation over time, the impact of the conversation, so how many people is it reaching, and also spikes in the conversation and what causes those spikes. And then we can also pull a vast amount of quantitative metrics from these social media listening tools. It then also allows us to see the different themes in the conversation. So which is represented by the word cloud and the topic wheel. For example, there were themes coming out, a lot of conversations around blessers and also around girlfriend allowance, which is a monthly stipend that men are paid to their girlfriends. So we can see people's sentiments around that and what they're saying. And obviously that relates to the expectation of men being the providers for the family, which is part of the whole underlying thing around misogyny and gender-based violence. And so this allows us to get really real-time and unique insights into what's being said. And then we can also see the authors in the conversation. So it allows us to see the influencers and who has the most impact in the conversation, but it also lets us see men who are speaking out against gender-based violence and misogyny online. And all of this is very useful for our interventions. So our interventions have two parts. One of them is around dialogue facilitation, both online and offline, as well as content creation. So we use the unique and real-time insights from the research to guide these processes, and the research is also ongoing. We look on the tools we write reports, but we also look on the tools every day. So we use the social media listening tools to identify men who are speaking out against gender-based violence, who are our potential change agents. So we then send their messaging saying we see you and we stand by with you, come and view the skill kit on our website. So for example, last year in a space of 6 weeks, we found 10,500 men speaking out against gender-based violence, and we had a high rate of when we sent in this messaging, they came through. Obviously, we've got all the metrics, and they came and looked at our skill kit. Our skill kit is developed across 4 languages, and it contains like mini dialogue facilitation training around listening, asking curious questions, and engaging with men who are expressing misogynistic sentiments. We also have shareable content to start conversations on social media. And then we also have the capacity to generate content. Our dialogue facilitators generate content, and we also have an in-house content team who develops more high-end content. So what we're trying to do is to get men to end the silence and speak out against misogyny and gender-based violence, both online and offline. And this is an ongoing process. So we're continuously drawing in more and more men using the social media listening tools, as well as through sectoral engagement, community radio stations, and WhatsApp. And we're also holding these men in process over time. So we invite them to join our Facebook group and also WhatsApp groups where we continue the conversation. So for example, many of the men who joined us last year are still with us. And through doing this, we can positively shift the misogyny narrative and therefore reduce gender-based violence. So we have a team of in-house dialogue facilitators, and then we also engage our change agents in these processes of doing dialogue facilitation online with men who are expressing negative sentiments around women. So, and here it's also interesting, there's different kind of levels of this. So some men are just born into these social norms that they never question. So men need to be the providers, women need to be cooking in the kitchen. Then you get men who are really making, sexist jokes and horrible content. And then you get men that are really actually violent and expressing really horrible things online. So there's these different categories. So this is just really concise and just summary of some of the things that we share with our change agents to get involved in the dialogue facilitation. So basically it's adapting the general things about dialogue facilitation that we normally do to the online environment. So we're not belittling and criticizing people, we're rather asking people questions and getting them to reflect. We try to stay positive, and obviously this content, you can see from some of the tweets that I shared previously that it can be really horrible. We all know the online space can be really toxic, so we just try to get people to take care of themselves. And then we sometimes use humor where appropriate, like funny memes and stuff, obviously only when it's appropriate to the situation, but that gets really good results as well. And then with our change agents, we also have dialogue decks where we give them suggestive responses just to inspire them of what they can say when they come across some kind of misogynistic comment. And it's, again, trying to get people to reflect and to kind of call out this type of content. And the other support that we give to our change agents is that they can message into our Turn WhatsApp number, and then they come to a menu where they have there's videos on how to dialogue across 4 language contexts, and they have access to the dialogue deck, and they also have access to support from our in-house dialogue facilitators. So our dialogue facilitators will go back people up, they'll share their content, and just get them more involved in the process. And what we also have is dialogue jam sessions where our dialogue facilitators dialogue together all at the same time. And we also will invite change agents to these dialogue jam sessions. And then we also have all the metrics of how this kind of impacts what's happening online. So for example, these are the results of an hour of dialogue facilitation by our 10 in-house dialogue facilitators. And we reached 144,000 people and had a total of 380,000 impressions. And obviously that will be upscaled to inviting change agents to these sessions. And then we also have the ability to, as I mentioned, develop content, which is all guided by our research and also insights from our dialogue facilitators. So dialogue facilitators also compile like insights documents of what they're seeing and learning while they're dialoguing online, because they're constantly online starting these conversations. So this is everything from tweets to the dialogue deck to our dialogue facilitators make kind of Canva designs that they use to facilitate dialogue, Then we have actually more like high-end in-house content creation team who makes more high-end content and even high-end advertising content. So one of our ads that they developed was shown on DSTV, and it has won like numerous prestigious advertising awards and generated millions of rands of free advertising. We also have published in media online, and we've also run programs on community radio stations and public service announcements, and all of that to draw in more people.
What do you do?
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna-Lee.
You promised you wouldn't do this again.
Okay, I think I'll skip the video. It's a bad thing, but just to finish off, the kind of approach of our intervention is not to shame and blame men. It's we see that people are hurting other people or hurt themselves. So we're trying to disrupt the intergenerational cycle of violence through using social media for healing. So also just wanted to end off by inviting anyone to join us. You can message hi to the turn number, you can scan the QR code, and then come join in our dialogue facilitation jam sessions. You can visit our website or join our groups.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jenna-Lee, also, if the video is available online, maybe you can drop it into the chat.
Yes, sure, I'll do that.
Because I know it was a little quirky right there. So we're going to open it up for discussion. We've got about 15 minutes and wanted to give people just a chance to respond to each other, give the panelists a chance to respond to each other. Was there anything that stuck out? Anything that you want to ask each other?
Well, I have a couple of answers of some questions that we had in the chat.
Yeah, go for it.
Maybe I could. So we were asked some tips for partnership. Well, what tips have we can highlight around the partnership we have been doing with DigiMENTE? And I think it's important first to have like a good diagnosis and data of why digital curriculum is important, like to get along with the data for going to partners. The second thing is to search the interest of possible partner. No, for example, if it's a network of schools or is the public sector, what type of goals or mission is this partner going through, and how can, for example, in our case, DigiMENTE could help them. No, so no one search about the possible partners and see the link on how DigiMENTE can help for them. The second one, I think, is like to really, what we have been doing is to invite teachers to have free trainings to show them DigiMENTE, to show them how can this work, and so that they can amplify it. And the other thing I was thinking about is to show all the different partners in order to see how it's becoming like a movement, and how any more schools, more public sector, more local governments are going on with DigiMENTE. That's what I was talking about. And the second question was around going around how DigiMENTE can go with different socioeconomic background schools. That's actually the main goal we had at the beginning. And for that, we have been working with public sector, especially, like to see how can we go around with DigiMENTE with the public sector, so we can have the biggest amplification. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can answer one of the questions here from Albert. He asks or says, the digital divide I felt even here in France. Elderly workers here had trouble organizing furlough pay, doctor's visits, getting vaccine appointments. Can existing institutions help bridge the divide? Have they done that in your area? Yeah, I mean, there are existing institutions. I know that in my area, the libraries provide all kinds of classes for particularly senior citizens to learn how to navigate the web, how to even set up a simple email and that sort of thing. Of course, that was not possible during the pandemic, but they do have that available to everyone. Also, I think now, because of the pandemic, we've had a huge infrastructure bill, and part of the bill is going to incorporate broadband service to all areas. So that's it's already in the works. It's happening. The problem that I think I'm still sort of grappling with is how do we, some of these websites are really complex. I mean, even signing up for the vaccine for people who don't know how to use, who aren't tech savvy was really complicated. And in the beginning, it was really complicated. I mean, you had to check every hour. It was crazy in the beginning. So so that is something that I don't know. I'm still like trying to figure out with just in my own community, how to prevent that from happening again. But we all have to be advocates in our own, at the local level and as well at the national level as well. But I think if we become more involved in nonprofits, they were also very instrumental in helping people get appointments. So they were reaching out to the communities they serve to try to help them with just the vaccine appointments, but also just alleviate some of the loneliness, isolation that they were feeling. I know that, and with my fair tax campaign, with the people that we couldn't reach, we would do presentations with nonprofits, and they would sometimes gather people in their offices, all masked, so that they could hear the presentations. So there was coordinating up with other nonprofits that serve marginalized communities.
I also just really appreciated your echoing of how can we be a neighbor to each other, because I think there were so many different technologies that I know I was like I still can't figure out easily like how to get testing for COVID in Boston. It's like impossible to do. And I like pay attention to the internet quite frequently. But Marissa, I was really curious from your perspective. You had talked about the campaigns that youth and young people had led and just prepping them for that. And you showed some of the examples within the video, but I was curious, like, what were some of the different examples and what did that mean for when young folks were engaging with other people that they knew or sort of didn't know through those campaigns?
Yeah, no, thank you. And you're just asking about like, how did we prep for their trainings and how did they, no, and that was an interesting part of it too, because again, everything, we were very transparent with them, like, this is our process, this is what we're hoping, the first sessions of the program was developed so that we are sharing information with them, but all of it was leading to, okay, now how do you share information with others, right? So they, everything, they chose issues that were most important to them. So again, focusing on different rights, right to housing, like looking at mass incarceration, education. This year, I think we were to do a more on climate change, because that was something that we had heard them talk about. So, looking at creative ways of how we research, right? So, how do you find information, everything that they do, every presentation that they had to create. So this was like a digital presentation. They had to have an artistic component. So it was actually interesting, while folks, again, the level of interaction with, or internet that they had varied, but across the board, like what we found is all students didn't have art supplies, right, during the pandemic, and like even now. So we actually mailed them art supplies so that they could create and then do the digital presentation. So that was something that we noted, like, while I'm so glad that it was brought up about the digital divide, because that is a real, in New York City, that is an issue, but also there was also this, students didn't have markers, and just, it wasn't something. So so prepping them both with research, prepping them both with like giving them time to present and practice and receive feedback, which was really, really critical. How do we do presentations that captivate and mobilize their audience, and then also just supplies, so yeah.
And Jenna-Lee, a question in the chat was, one, what are social media listening tools that you're using? And then two was just speaking about the dialogue facilitators and who were they and whether they were compensated or volunteering. I was wondering for the social media listening piece of it, if you could just talk about like what is social media listening? Because I think like sometimes, yeah, it's helpful to break down the terms.
Sure. So we use Brands Watch, Brands Eye, and our tech teams also developed a in-house tool that we use to analyze the conversation. So we have our own tool that we use as well. So it's basically what you do is you get keywords that you get from your knowledge, literature, desktop research, and you plug it into the tool, or analysts plug it into the tool, and then it draws up all the conversation on public social media around various topics. So you would define your topic, and then it obviously brings out all the metrics. And then for the second question around, we have our in-house dialogue facilitation team who are paid, and then we are recruiting thousands of change agents to join us in the dialogue facilitation online, and they are not paid. It's volunteer, you know, even if they spend 10 minutes a day or whatever, when they're online, get involved in the conversation. So we do that through how I explained in the presentation, but also through partnerships with other nonprofits and collectives and a whole bunch of different ways. So also just to end off, I just forgot to say that this work is scalable across all of South Africa. So we work all across South Africa, but it also can be replicated in different countries. So some of our other projects we're starting to replicate in different countries. So my point is that we are very interested in collaborations across all over the world. So if anyone's interested in collaborating, like, we would love to set up a meeting and chat about how that's possible. Yeah, we've already had meetings with organizations in Kenya to replicate it there. So it's all, yeah.
And you had a side question that came up when you were speaking, which is, I'm curious whether there are narratives, new organic positive narratives that emerge for the men you engage that focus on advocating ending gender-based violence when you ran your campaigns online.
I'm not sure what the question is, but we have the gender-based violence command center here, which is the kind of hotline where people can call in. That looks interesting. I'll look at the article after.
In Spanish, but it gets the information around the related work, because here at Bogota, it's this hotline that is attended by psychologists, and men can call and have this socio-emotional work for preventing, and it has been working really good. And they're also going to start the next week a school for care that is specialized for men, so that they know how to change diapers, but also to listen, etc., etc. So that would be a really nice thing to match, and to maybe we could talk about it and see how we can, I don't know, get knowledge, share knowledge.
That would be great. I mean, I'd love to connect with everyone after this. Anyone reach out. How do you measure impact? So we have a whole monitoring and evaluation plan through. So there's lots of components to it, but we use a social media listening tool to measure the impact on the conversation. So when we completely go to scale, we'll do the baseline study, like look at the baseline on that, and then compare it against that. So we're using a lot of those metrics, and then we also have obviously metrics for the website of how many people actually come and consume this skill set. And then we also do like more qualitative, like surveys and stuff on our Facebook group. That's what we'll be implementing.
I'm just appreciating the diversity of all the work that's happening, that each of you are doing. Are there other questions or topics that like came up for each of you that you want to talk and spend the last 2 minutes on?
I just had a quick question for Marissa. Are you going to continue doing this, excuse me, art activism online, or will you go to in person when things hopefully will resume at some point?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. For Youth Voices Lead, we're still figuring that out because it becomes harder. If we did a national program, I think it would have to be digital. But right now, the organization itself though has in person because it was a request by the schools to return to school. So we actually have an in-person program right now. But yeah, thank you for asking. That was something we were trying to figure out and what feels safe and right for folks. So.
Can I just ask one more question to Tatiana? DigiMENTE. I may have missed this because there's a lot of information, but how did you develop those training modules, the curriculum for the lessons? How did you develop that? Who did you collaborate with, or what was the process?
Yes. It was a process in which we first wanted to make a diagnosis of what is the problem around misinformation, about fake news, how was this affecting to the youth. So first, like having the data. A second important thing is that we review a lot of curriculums around the world that have been working with this and see how can we create a curriculum that was for Spanish speaking people in Latin America. And we did a first version of it, and we made a pilot that gave us a lot of feedback from students and teachers, and we created with that like the second version. That was like in general the process of creating the curriculum.
And did you find that it was very different from other curriculums that you found across in other parts of the world?
Yes, and also in a sort of way, yes, because also we were in the COVID, so we had to make it more flexible, like really easy to. If it's in Spanish, I sent it there, but what we aim is that really a teacher or a student can go and do it by themselves. It hasn't to be like first you have to do one module, then the second one. No, like you can really do it more by yourself, and we try to make it different also to make it more fun. Like there's an activity like your powerful hashtags or creating memes. I don't know if that's the word in English.
Memes, yeah.
So yes, I think it was really similar in their structure and maybe in the topics, but we really wanted to be flexible and fun.
Okay, thank you.
Something that I wanted to, hello everyone, I'm with Tatiana. I don't have camera because my connection is unstable, sorry for that. But I want to talk about that question because also we in our reviewing about curriculums in all the world, we found that we had one similar in our region in Brazil that is called Educamedia, but we also find that all the curriculums was so focused on fake news and how fake news like to develop skills to find how fake news was affecting not only youth but also teachers and also people, and we found that in our region we had to get on top of our needs about critical thinking and critical reading, but also reading comprehension, that we have a lot of needs in that skill. So we put the best ways about how to develop these skills, and this is how you found in DigiMENTE not only how to search and develop skills in fake news and how to get off that, but also you found the ethics and you found how to create products and information, but with the best way to about critical thinking and how to produce them with our skills. So yeah, we didn't go as well as other curriculums that were only focused in fake news, but we have to focus also in creation and also in participation in communities. So that's the difference too.
Thank you, Jaya. We are right at time, but wanted to grab in, if folks have like 2 more minutes, maybe grab in the last 2 questions. So Marissa, Caleb asked, perhaps this is a silly question, but have you seen any difference between digital art and offline art in the way in which it's impacting people or engaging people around social development issues?
Yeah, not a silly question. Yes, but also, I mean, I think it's a longer answer, but yes, I mean, I think like the mural process, the mural process was very different, and there's something very different about creating art, being able to put paint on each other, you know what I mean? And being in that space is very different from digital. But again, this digital, because it's so tied to social media, I think it also gets people excited about working together in different ways. Like, and I think that this idea of viral and how these two interlink, I think is interesting. So I'd love to talk offline because that's a much longer question, but I don't think it's silly at all. I think it's actually really deserves much more time. So thank you for asking. I'll put my email in the chat if you're interested.
Cool, thank you. And then Jenna-Lee, the question from Fergus, which I think there's a much longer question, but just thinking about gender-based violence was communicated via South Africa government as like the second or sort of parallel pandemic during the lockdown. And he was just wondering, have you been able to motivate for a more outcomes-based social bond between sort of the work that you're doing in the national sector or sort of the private sector and the national sector or the national state? Yeah.
Do you mean between the government? I'm not sure what he means, between the government and our project.
Exactly.
No, not no, we haven't linked up with the government at this stage. But yeah. So no, we haven't done that.
Yeah, I think it's such an important question around like the online and offline space. All right. Any final thoughts or closing comments that people want to leave us with? Cool. Thank you all for being here. And if you want to drop in conversations, communications, or ways to communicate with you in the chat, then feel free. And thank you for taking the time and sharing the work that all of you are doing in so many different ways. The next step for folks who want, we've got sort of a networking session that if you go back to the Zoom lobby, you can, and I was trying to share my screen so you could see it, but I don't think I can fully do that. Let me see if I can do it. If you go back into the Zoom lobby, you can see it here. Then you can go into the join session for the facilitated networking. We'll do that for about 45 minutes, 40 minutes, and then we'll do sort of the final closing panel here, and you can start the session here. So thank you all for joining us, and we will see you later.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and for all the tech and support.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Take good care.